Hello and welcome everyone and welcome to track B of Flutter Festival, Colombo. And let me quickly brief you on the agenda for today. So here with us, we have three amazing speakers and each of them will be sharing with us their insights on three different areas in Flutter. So without further ado, let me quickly introduce you to the very first speaker for today. So hi, Ms. Shatu, are you here? Hi.
Hello.
Cool. So I guess you meet
Hope you
again.
are getting me loud and clear.
If I want to quickly introduce him, he is a co-founder at Genius Software Private Limited, and he has a number of titles. So let's see if I can remember some of them. He is an ambassador at Oath Zero and a country representative in new technologies, as well as a AWS community builder. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Shatu Vishwajit as he explains to us how we can implement authentication with Flutter. So, Mr. Shatu, the stream is yours.
Thank you very much. So today we are going to talk about authentication with Flutter. So this is welcome to the Flutter Festivals first session, and thank you very much for inviting me to do a session. So without further ado, so you already got to know who am I. So I'm Chatu Vishwajit. I'm Auth0 ambassador and I'm AWS community builder. And you can find me in Twitter. It's at I am Chatu. So the first is the disclaimer. All the ideas and the things that I'm going to explain or expressed will be my own personal views and doesn't represent any of the communities or the companies that I am may represent. So first, let me explain you what is authentication is. With a formal definition, the authentication is a term associated with proving user's identity. Usually, a user proves their identity by providing their credentials. That's it. And agreed a piece of information shared between the user and system. So when you provide your identity with some credentials, the information from the server will be kind of a share. It will be a kind of a token or maybe a cookie. So because in nowadays we don't send credentials in each and every request, we will first negotiate a token with the server or the resource owner, and that we will be providing that token or the cookie or the agreed piece of information to get the or access the resources. So that's the formal definition. Basically, it's kind of a way of getting to know who is the user and going to validate and only give the access to that particular resource. So when it comes to authentication, there are several factors that you can use to identify your user. So first thing is something you know. It's a normal, a typical way of handling the authentication. It's like password. So you can use something your user knows. So user will be defining the password and he or she will be going to remember it. Maybe not, or using a password manager to kind of make it remember it, help the user to remember the password. So, and also not only password, PIN also a kind of a thing that user know. PIN is kind of a numeric or alphanumeric a variable length thing. We call it a PIN, like 4 to 6 or 4 to 8, like you use in bank transactions, in ATM transactions. So this is kind of a thing user know. And the second thing is the factor is you can use something user have. It's like user's mobile phone. You can send a text or you can send an email with a one-time token, or a user may be having an hardware-based token generator, and you can ask that token to enter. It's kind of very secure rather than password, because that user need to have that physical item with them at the moment they're using, and it's generating a code which is going to be shortly lived. So it's going to be very kind of a very secured way of authentication. And the third way is something you are. So this is kind of a new authentication method. That's where you can use biometric based security fragments, like you can scan your fingerprint. Most of the new Macs and all the iPhones supported it, and some of the Android devices supports. So you can use fingerprint, or you can use Retina. Some of the uh, mobile phones also have, and especially made enterprise devices also have this kind of security, and most of these things are already available for military based securities. So these are factors, and basically you can use passwords, or you can use a token or SMS, or you can use multi-factors. We call it MFA. So yeah, you can mix a few of these factors together to identify the user. So remember, it's up to you, and the validity of the valuability of your resource, the value of your resource is based on that factors. You need to select what kind of factors you are going to use in your application to secure your application and to authenticate your users in your application. Moving forward, so let's talk about how we can implement authentication. So when it comes to authentication, so these kind of things are very common for most of the applications. There are some applications which you don't need to provide authentication. You are just sharing public information. But most of the applications that you're going to build for will be needed to have authentication. You will be have to create a way of authentication your application or users, how to log in them, how to create accounts, how to manage the session, how it's going to be expired, and how it's going to going to be long. How is the user session going to be? How long will be users going to be logged in? Most of when it comes to the Flutter, previously we only need to talk about mobile platform. At that time, normally the Flutter will be the mobile application will be keeping the session throughout the whole time. It's not going to be like a session handling like web platform, where in the it's going to be a common browser that used by family. So you will be going to terminate your session after 15 minutes, 1 hour, and you will be using a refresh token to do the refreshing part. So it's kind of a complicated now, since Flutter support almost all platforms. So based on the platforms you're targeting on, your authentication strategy may be differ. So it's up to you to decide what kind of authentication mechanism you're going to use. So when it comes to authentication, there are several standards that you can follow. So like OpenID 2.0 standard, there's OpenID Connect or DIC, which is written top of OAuth 2.0. And when it comes to OpenID, it also has support for native applications. That if you have much time, let's discuss on that at the end. So I'm going to tell you that there are standards that you can follow. So these are standards. You can find their implementations based on your platform of preference, what you're going to build when it comes to backend. But when it comes to today, we are going to talk about only the Flutter part. So based on this specification, let's say you have your own authentication server, which is written top of OAuth 2.0. At that time, you can use a Flutter plugin, which supports this protocol and handle your authentication. So let's move forward and let's see how we can implement the authentication in a Flutter application. So first way, don't reinvent the wheel. So you don't need to have build your own authentication or identity provider. Let's say you are going to build an application that you target most of the users which has Facebook. Like if you are going to create an application, it's kind of a application with value-added features added to the Facebook. So most of your application users will be Facebook users, or Meta users. So at that moment, you can actually use the Facebook is an identity provider, and Google is an identity provider. So you can use these kind of third-party identity providers to make the authentication. Then you don't need to maintain user base data, a user table, or a user resources to have it in here. You just can use the SDKs and use existing user accounts from that identity provider. So it's kind of good way. In some, it's like you have pros where you don't need to maintain your own servers for identity. You don't need to keep the user data, and you can use that already existing data, complete user base with your identity provider. The cons will be, of course, your users need to have that identity provider's user account. So if it is another one who don't have Facebook account, will not able to use your application unless they are creating a Facebook account. Like when it comes to Oculus headsets, now it's required to you to have a Facebook account to use that hardware device. It was not that mandatory previously, but now it's mandatory. So if you're going to use an Oculus, the Meta Oculus headset, you will be have to have an Facebook account. And based on third-party providers, these SDKs might get deferred or change time, then your application will be have to respond to that changes. And next thing is using identity as service. So there are services who actually provide identity as a service with they actually handle all this specification, GDPR, and all these things related to user privacy. So they will handle it for you. And like some of the identity universe change, like recently Apple mandate to use sign with Apple if you have third-party identity providers. Then if you are using your own identity provider, then you will have to implement it yourself. But most of these identity providers actually implemented it as soon as the Apple announced it. The other ways, you can use your own. You can build your own authentication provider. You can create a service that maybe use the WT, and cookie is not a good option since you are targeting the mobile platforms. So it's up to you to choose between these three, and I'm going to explain more on this. So when it comes to third-party identity providers, you have sign with Facebook, you have sign with Google. So you can use Google accounts to sign in on your Flutter application, and sign with Apple. So this is kind of a mandatory requirement. If you're using all these third-party providers, you need to have sign with Apple enabled. So there are third-party SDKs to integrate this with Flutter, and let's discuss it later. But when it comes to this, there are several providers. Even sign with Twitter is available, sign with GitHub is available. It's kind of based on your actual audience of your application to choose what kind of social identity providers you will be needed to allocate. So there are some services which only allow to use these kind of identity providers to log in, and some allow still to log in with email and password. So it's completely up to you to decide what kind of strategy that you're going to go with your application. And when it comes to identity as service, the second point, you can actually use Firebase authentication. It's kind of it has a really generous free tier and has plenty of tutorials available. Even Google has Google Code Lab, how to integrate Firebase and Firebase services with authentication. So Firebase has a pretty good community support and multiple tutorials from the community, multiple YouTube videos, and complete code labs to go step by step to create it with Flutter. So it has all these dark flavors with streaming support. So the Firebase authentication will run on top of a stream, and you can actually use some kind of a stream builder to listen on the changes of authentication, refreshing the tokens, getting the tokens, login event and logout event, and etc. So also there's Auth0 and Okta. Disclaimer: I am a Auth0 ambassador. I might be biased. So Auth0 and Okta is kind of a very famous enterprise company, provide services for identity as service for enterprises. Auth0 is very famous for middle and small medium uh, enterprises to have Auth0. So Okta is kind of on Auth0. So these two are kind of having two different kind of SDKs and two different kind of use cases. So you can both of these actually support OpenID Connect and supports OAuth 2.0. And there are cloud service providers like Azure. They had B2C for identity as service and AWS Cognito. So it also OpenID 2.0 complement identity as a service. So all of these kind of have kind of a pricing tier. Auth0 has a free tier, and Azure also has a kind of a free tier where you can use. AWS also offers a free tier for the first tier, and Firebase is kind of a very useful, and it's very generous. Free tier is also available for Firebase. So these actually have Firebase has its own SDK. AWS Cognito has SDK from Amplify. So these kind of have very good SDKs supported by the company itself. And Auth0 and Okta and Azure, they have a kind of a community packages because they are OpenID Connect complement. So if there's any plugin which is supports OpenID Connect, you can use that parameters from the documentation and just implement as is. And this is how the packages for the authentication. Most of them are actually I have personal experience with. So Firebase Auth is from Firebase, where it's very highly active and highly used plugin. And Flutter App Auth is a kind of a wrapper built upon App Auth, which is a kind of very famous plugin for iOS and Android for having OpenID Connect features with Fixie. So you can use this one to actually authenticate Auth0, Fusion Auth, and it also support Azure B2C. So from Amplify, from AWS, they have Amplify underscore Auth underscore Cognito, where you can use this plugin to use if you are going to use Amazon Cognito based identity provider. So these packages are the Flutter App Auth is actually community driven. Firebase Auth is from the Firebase team, and Amplify is from the AWS team. So all of these kind of have good reputation in pub.dev. You can actually have a look before you're going to use them. And before moving to this one, I'm going to talk about a little bit on how to use your own one. So this is the most common way that we currently use. So we are having our own API based on GraphQL to do the authentication. So it will be handling the authentication when the user credential provide. It will be returning a JW token for the access token, which is going to be shortly lived. Mostly it's about 5 to 10 minutes. And it also sending an refresh token, which is going to be a long-lived one, 1 day to about 3 to 5 days. So using these two, you can actually create your own mechanism to do the refreshing. So like if you can use kind of a interceptors when it comes to HTTP calling. When you send a request to your server, you can intercept the request, not the request part. You can intercept the response part. If the response has unauthenticated, then you can in the on the background you can do the refreshing part and use the new refresh token and retry the failed request again, and it will be completely working seamlessly. So which is one we are currently using. And there are community projects to have your own identity as services. So you can have your own OpenID Connect compatible projects. There are plenty of these open source projects for each and every languages. So there's very famous one for .NET, and there's another one for Go, and there's a one from Auth0 which is open source and maintained for Node.js platforms. So you can use these kind of things as your starting point, or you can implement in your own way to generate an JWT token and do the security part in there. Or you can read the OpenID spec and create your own uh, OpenID provider, but it's going to be a little bit hard reading this documentation, so it's up to you. So moving forward, so now you have authenticated, you got a token, you got the information piece that you shared between your resource and the user. So what are the ways to store this session? So let's talk about how to store these sessions. So as you know that Flutter supports multiple platforms, then storing these tokens or credentials in the uh, platforms is going to be a little bit difficult. When it comes to iOS and macOS, they use a thing called keychain. It's going to be a completely encrypted, secured storage. And when you store something, and it's going to be completely secured, and only that application or a user with user privileges from that phone or platform will have access to that one. And key store was previously unencrypted. It's a place to use, we call it shared preferences in Android, but now they introduce from Android 5 or and upwards, they encrypt a thing called encrypted shared preferences, and you can use this one and make sure that your minimum supported Android SDK is going to be upward from the 5.0. And credential store is for the Windows. It's kind of a Windows way of handling the encrypted thing. So it's going to be encrypted and secure. And leap secret for the Linux is a way of saving the credentials in the Linux. Unfortunately, most of the libraries that we currently have support for the web is actually saving in the local storage, which is completely not encrypted. And even when you go to developer tools and you can read the local storage. So this is the only they currently have for the local storage. You can encrypt it, but the encryption key and the way of decrypting it will be in your source code when it comes to when you export to the web. So these are the packages for storing the session. Sorry, there's a typo in there. Should be stored in the session. So Flutter Secure Storage is currently in 5.0.2 as I remember. So it is very updated, heavily used application, which is actually using keychain for iOS and macOS, and it also uses encrypted shared preferences for the Android. And currently it doesn't have any information on the Windows part, but I think they are working on it. It's a community-driven project, and they have a lip secret for the Linux. And currently all these platforms, the keychain for iOS and macOS, which is currently up, and Keystore and Android is also up. And you can use Flutter Auth Provider. This is disclaimer maintained by me. This is actually based. This is kind of a generic way of storing your authentication and handling the authentication using the provider spec. And you can provide your own way to do the storing of your session. And you can use Flutter Secure Storage to provide and store your tokens and your user. And it has multiple support for giving any kind of users. So it is completely up to you to describe it. And so as a summary, we talked about authentication and what is authentication, what are the factors that we can allow from the users to have the authentication. And we talked about the ways of implementing the authentication, how we can actually use like social identity providers from third parties, like login with Facebook, login with Google, or we can use login with Apple. So these are kind of a third party authentication providers. And also you can actually use identity as services providers. Currently we have got the famous one for the Flutter is actually Firebase, and we got Auth0, we got Okta. Disclaimer, I'm actually a Auth0 ambassador. And we also got Fusion Auth. We also got this Magic Link. So magic.io, they also have authentication as provider. and we got AWS Cognito and Azure B2C. So these kind of cloud providers have their own identity as service providers, where you can do kind of a white labeling, having your own kind of identity providers, and these will be handling all these updates to the and all the security measures and all the privacy related things like GDPR and all stuff will be handling from these identity as service providers. And when it comes to your own way, you can actually implement your own JWT based authentication system. It's very kind of started as simple, but you need to have kind of secure mechanisms like Pixie based authentication. I hope we have more time to speak on. If you have more time, let's talk about Pixie and ways of handling the storing and the authentication is based on completely supported platforms. So you will be need to use keychain for iOS and macOS, and you can use key store with encrypted shared preferences for Android, which is going to be, if you're going to use encrypted shared preferences, it need to be uh, the the Android OS version support need to be above 5.0. And when it comes to Windows, you need to use credential store. And when it comes to the Linux, you can use libsecret. So there are the most common and most famous plugin is Flutter Secure Storage. Uh, you can use this one, and it is actually currently support all these things that I mentioned, and they are in 5.0 version. So they are is kind of a regularly updated, and I think it's a Flutter favorite one. So you can use these things to store the authentication, and for the handling the authentication, actually you can use Flutter underscore auth underscore provider, which is maintained by me. Or if you go with Flutter Firebase, it has complete all this maintaining, storing, and all these things will be done from the Firebase auth PK. You can just install it and just grab your application with this one, and you can access the user or the token or whatever you want from that SDK rather than calling anything. And when it comes to the AWS Cognito, the Amplify CLI, you can actually just add Amplify, add auth, and it's going to be the Flutter will be adding the auth features, and you can use that one and all the Amplify features if you're in the AWS arena. And for the Azure and Auth0 or Okta, you can actually use Flutter App Auth. Is based on App Auth, which is a very famous community-based project for Android and iOS. It's just a wrapper for the Flutter, and you can use this one. And remember, the Flutter App Auth is currently only supported for iOS and Android. It doesn't have support for Windows or web either. So make sure that for the Firebase, it has all support for all base platforms. And for Cognito-based Amplify, as I remember, is only support now to Flutter Android and iOS. It will be adding support later, maybe, because they started recently for supporting Flutter, so they are actually going through it. They had a good SDK for React and Node.js, and now they are actually moving towards the Flutter also. So now it's time to have kind of a Q&A. Let's check if we have comments. Okay, if you have any questions, you can raise them.
Hey. So let me quickly take a look at the comment section to see if you have any questions. Okay, we have actually one. Someone has asked, can I be a Flutter Sri Lanka member? So I'm not sure if that can be answered. So would like maybe give a try. Is it related to authentication in Flutter? All right.
Yeah. To be a Flutter Sri Lankan member, I think you can build your own Flutter application and contact these guys and work on kind of doing kind of these amazing events. And if you are actually listening to this one and being with us, even these hard times, I think you are already a Flutter Sri Lanka member.
Okay, cool. So I believe that we don't have any more questions. So thank you, Mr. Jatu, for filling us in on all that information. I believe that authentication is indeed one of the key features in building any application. So I guess there are no more questions. Okay, we have one more. Is there a way to restrict users to multiple logins using multiple devices in the same time using Firebase service? Let me quickly put this on the show.
Till now, I haven't actually tried this one, but I can give you a kind of way of doing it. When you do an login with the device ID, you can actually get the device ID and save it into your DB. And later, if it any other one going to logged in, you can check the device ID, and if it's already logged in, you can just unlock from all the all the logins, and just let the user log in with the new device. So you will be need to handle that session. I think it will be support most of the OpenID based specification, and Firebase is actually custom OpenID provider. I'm not sure about they are implementing the OpenID spec to disallow multiple logins. But for now, I'm actually not haven't done that. So sorry, I cannot give you a straightforward answer. But you need to maintain a way of having in database that this user is already logged in, and later you can just check with the device ID and let them log in again if it's not an logged in only it is that particular device.
Cool. So thank you again, Mr. Chatu. And are there any more questions before we wrap up this session? I guess we don't have any. So thank you again. And with this, I guess we can move on to the next session in line. And please stay tuned, and we'll be starting the next session in a short while.
Yeah, and thank you very much, and hope you have a good time.
Same to you. Hello everyone, and welcome back. And let me quickly introduce you to the next speaker for the day. So say hi to first to Rajan. So let me quickly add him to the stream and his slides. So he's Flutter developer by profession at Silver and Upwork, and he'll be filling us in on how we can use Flutter with BLE devices. So the stream is yours.
Yeah, hello. So good evening, everyone. So I hope everyone is here, safe and healthy. Yeah, today we are going to learn a new thing about Flutter with interaction with BLE. So I hope someone already know about BLE, or someone usually see this BLE kind of job opportunities in freelancer up working somewhere. So when we browse through the different Flutter opportunities, Flutter jobs, we usually see BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, or Bluetooth Beacon, like that. So we usually see, but you most of the time we just keep, because we don't have any knowledge about that, right? So here we are going to learn something about that today. So okay, let's hop in. Hope you can see the screen. So today I'm not going to go through the live coding or something else. Today I'm going to explain how a BLE is structured, what is BLE, and how can we integrate with Flutter, what are the packages available, how can we simulate such a BLE devices ourselves without exact hardware, and using native SDKs to do such things. So why we need a native SDK like that. So we can continue with that. Yeah, first let me check. Okay, so first we need to know what's Bluetooth, right? So usually everyone knows what is Bluetooth, because we've been using around a decade, right? So as you know, Bluetooth is a wireless technology standard, especially it's a short range uh, wireless technology. As we know already, it utilizes the UHF of radio waves, right? And it's allow you to build a personal area network. It's actually, when we turn on a Bluetooth in our mobile device or a specific device, it will create a personal area network. It's actually short area network, so it will only work within a specific range, right? So we usually used for exchange data between different devices, different mobile phones. We just share photos, videos, small APK files earlier, right? So that's how we started with Bluetooth. So yeah, that's the thing. So as we know already, Bluetooth is useful for data transfer. So it can be found in various devices, from Android to iOS. So the one biggest disadvantage of this Bluetooth is it uses a lot of power. When you share a video, large video or photo between two different two different devices, it will consume a lot of power. So to mitigate such problems, the BLE come to states, right? So okay, we can continue and learn about more about that. So okay, if you use a Bluetooth connection all day, we can notice the lot of power uh, consumption. Yeah. So the particular problem is some device need very less energy consumption to manage, like let's say an IoT device, a smartwatch, like that. So these are our IoT devices. It's working a small memory power, sorry, small battery power. So we need to make sure that our Bluetooth system or any wireless system consume a lot, very less energy, very less power to operate. So then only we can ensure that it will work a long time, right? So this is the thing about the Bluetooth, right? So to fix such problem, Bluetooth low energy is designed. So what exactly this Bluetooth low energy doing? So we can go through that. Okay, actually Bluetooth low energy also based on Bluetooth. So BL is designed to offer many of same features as Bluetooth, but focusing on low power. As results, it's not fast as Bluetooth, and it's not suitable for transferring large files, but it's ideal for transferring small amount of data with minimal power consumption. So when it comes to Flutter or any mobile development, so you may need to interact with some Bluetooth based devices. So when it comes to that, even our Flutter application and the BLE device, both should be consumed on very low energy. So if let's say our device is consuming a lot of energy, it's not reliable, right? Our application should be good performance, good memory usage. The same like that, we need to reduce the power consumption also. So that's how BLE is working. And IoT device and embedded devices we usually design with our for our own project. So a new product. In that case, we usually need to interact with that specific IoT device with our Flutter application. So in that case also we can use Flutter BLE, and we can use a BLE hardware in our embedded device and IoT device. So that's how BLE is very useful for us to learn, where we can apply in different level of application, right? So yeah, another thing is Bluetooth beacon. So there is something called beacons. In the name also you can understand what's beacon. Beacon is it's all usually emit a ID, emit a data, or emit something periodically. That's beacon. As Bluetooth beacon also, it will usually emit a specific data, a specific ID, or specific identification value with a specific period of time. So that's the beacon way. That's how beacon works. So in Bluetooth beacon also, you may somehow you may see a job opportunity in Flutter, sorry, a freelancer or Upwork. That we need to integrate a specific beacon into Flutter application. So this, in that sense, it's also using the BLE technology inside Flutter beacon. So we can learn about that also. Um, okay, let's move. Okay, so application, let's come to the application. So when we will need to apply this BLE technology with our Flutter application. So for example, let's say a manufacturer designed a smartwatch. Okay, smartwatch will use what it will do, it usually get our heartbeat and pulse and etc, the climate values, temperature, and how long we are walking, how many steps you are walking. These are the data usually a smartwatch get from our skin or temperature with the other sensors, right? With this data, we should continuously communicate with our Flutter application. In that case, we can use BLE. So the smartwatch will use very less amount of data, sorry, energy, and our Flutter application also will use less amount of energy. So this is how BLE works. And that's something called proximity marketing, which means something come near to somewhere, we can detect with Bluetooth and a Bluetooth BLE device. Let's say someone is bringing their phone to a office, bringing their phone to a entrance. So with the BLE signals, we can understand that devices incoming signal is coming from a device, which means near to this entrance, near to this office entrance, like that. So we can proximity check like that. Another important thing is indoor location tracking. Let's say there's a three-floor building, and it's a large building. So okay, someone have to navigate through this indoor building. So in that case, we can't really find where this user is actually located. Sometimes they come to the front entrance. Okay, they want to navigate through the whole building. Yeah, sometimes they go to second floor, and from there they want to navigate another place. So they can be anywhere, and they want to navigate the indoor location, right? In that case, we can place BLE beacons or BLE devices in different locations. The user can simply go in near and get connected with that BLE device, and that BLE device know the where we are located. So according to that reference point, we can locate different places of that particular building. So when he move to different floors, the Bluetooth will automatically know so where he's moving. So this is called indoor location tracking. And IoT project mean, as a engineer or any works, any courses, any different works, any personal works, we use integrate with IoT works, right? IoT mean embedded systems, right? So in that case also we can use instead of wireless Wi-Fi or other things, we can also use BLE technology. So yeah, that's how it's work. And yeah, when it comes, okay, let's come to the BLE guard. Okay, BLE guard means it's a protocol. What's protocol means a set of rules. So everything should have a rules to work in a proper way. So for a, let's say the internet has a internet has a protocol. So everything is working under that protocol. That's why everything is in working in a correct way. Like that, when we connect to a BLE device, it will also have a protocols to how we are going to communicate between BLE device and a Flutter application. So the BLE is so guard is a protocol which we use to communicate between Flutter and BLE devices. And okay, this is very important. Okay, these are very important theoretical part we must know to integrate with Flutter application. So let's say there is a device, okay, there is a thermometer which will work on BLE. So let's say he is scanning a temperature from somewhere, and it start to emit that temperature value with BLE values. So when we read that value from our Flutter application, we must know how this BLE exactly structured, how many data we are getting, how can we under identify that it's the temperature value we are getting. Sometimes it will also send the battery charge level from the thermometer. So the thermometer can send both the battery charge and the temperature value. So how will we know that which value is which value is temperature, which value is battery level? So for that we must know this structure of the BLE device. In that case, every BLE is emit with this kind of structure, right? It can have multiple services. So every service will have unique ID, like it's a 16-bit ID. So every service will have an ID. Inside a service, it can be multiple characteristics. We will see what is exactly, right. Let's say it's a thermometer. It can send two service. Like first service is temperature, and second service is battery level. Inside the temperature, it can send temperature in Celsius, and the past 30-day temperature, and uh, predicted temperature, like that. I'm just telling examples, right? So let's say a heart rate sensor. So it can have two different services, like heart rate service and uh, a battery level service. Inside the heart rate service, there can be heart rate value, where the sensor is located, and etc. There can be different value. The BL is divided between different values, so it will not come a bulk. When a BLE device is sending a data, it will divide the data into multiple services, multiple characteristics, where we can easily understand, we easily pick only what we need. So that's how service and characteristic works. And for example, here, let's say there is a device which will read the heart rate, and we are going to read it from our Flutter application. So there can be different services. The first service is heart rate services. Second services can be the battery level service. So inside the heart rate service, there is two characteristics. First one is heart rate measurement. It will come real time. When we read the heart rate, it will come as a stream. We can read it from Flutter application. Yeah, that's a one characteristic. Second characteristic, body sensor location. Where that sensor is located, we can just read from the BLE device that where it's located. These are two different characteristics inside the heart rate service. There can be another service like called battery service. Inside the battery service, there can be battery level, and the time remain, how much time it's remaining. That there can be different characteristics. Okay, I hope you understand about this BLE heart rate uh, guard structure. And yeah, there are several packages called for um, Flutter Bluetooth. So the important one is the Flutter Blue. There are several packages, Flutter BLE, LIB. They have different packages. You can use any which you prefer, which you use, which is easy to implement, right? There are some packages which are obsoleted. There's no null safety. They're using old embedded system, like that. So you must find a package which use latest version of Flutter SDK and latest version of Flutter embedded values and null safety, which is very important to integrate with the latest Flutter SDK, which anyway, right? So okay, um, let's see about plugin, right? So we can just search BLE. Okay, so in the BLE you can see different packages. This is a 15-month-old non-null safety package. We can't use this one. Yeah, you can see here is a package. So which use BLE technology, which will work with Android and iOS. Yeah, there are several packages. You know, uh, few null safety and latestly updated. So okay, we can search for Flutter Blue here. Flutter Blue. So yeah, here is the package. Okay, you understand how the BLE device structures, right? So just jump to the coding, right? You need to do the settings here, and yeah, this is same as the whole usual project. Yeah, this is very simple. Just just create a instance and Flutter Blue. That's the instance name, and Flutter Blue that start scan. This will this will start to scan all the BLE device around you. After that, just listen to that scan. Yeah, you will get the results. So when you get the results, you can get the device name, the RSSI mean it's a signal strength, how much signal strength it's coming. It's if it's very far, signal strength will be very low. If it's near us, usually signal strength will be increased. It's not, it can be vary, it's not like that. Yeah, you can get the device name, device ID, everything after scan results. So after that, you can stop scan. Everything's very simple. There's someone created this package, and everything's very simpler to understand. You don't have to know any underlying native codes for this package. You can just start creating an instant, start scanning, and get the results of the scan device. And after that, okay, we can go to here. Okay, you can see here. This is same as this. Yeah, you will get a bunch of results list in the list. So for we are using for loop here. So after that, we can just print the device name and its signal strength value. Let's say my BLE device name is my device. Hard 123. So we can put a if condition here. Yeah, if it's a BLE device which we intend to connect, yeah, we can just store the device into a device variable. Yeah, then stop the scan and device should connect. It will connect to the BLE device. That's all. Very simple. Then we just successfully connected a BLE device with our Flutter application. After that, as I said before, a Flutter application, sorry, a BLE device can have multiple services. First, you need to find all the services. In that case, just device dot discover services. It will list all the services that contain the BLE device. Each service will have a unique UID. So you must know there will be a unique ID that indicate the unique service. So we will have a list of list of services. Simple. After that, we just need to do a follow with that list view list. After that, with that specific service, we can call all the characteristics. I explained uh, in the view in slide, so you can see here. So you can see here, yeah, for different services we will have list of service. This is the first service, this is the second service. Okay, everything is going good. Yeah, this is the first service, this is the second service. Inside the service we can have multiple characteristics. That's why here it's like that. Here you can see we will have a list of service. Inside the each service we will get the characteristic as list. This is a list. For each characteristics we can get the different uh, results. So it can be read only, it can be write only, it can be notify only. Okay, a BLE device can emit different kind of data, like let's say battery level. Okay, the BLE is emitting battery level information, advertising the battery level information to everyone. We can just read it, we can't write it, right? We can't write a BLE battery level to a BLE device. So let's say it's battery level is 55 percentage. We can just read only, we can't write that value again to that uh, BLE device. That's read only characteristic. Let's say that's a IoT device. We can control that IoT device from our Flutter application, which means we need also read and write. Let's say we need to start a function in the BLE device. We can just write the data from a Flutter application specific data, it will, the BLE will understand and start the function. Here that BLE is the characteristic is a read and write. And let's say that's a term, that's a heart pulse reader. So we just start to read the pulse of a human. So here we need continuously read that heartbeat, right? Sometime 50, sorry, 90, 92, 70, 75. We need to read continuously. This is called notify. So there are different kind of characteristics. So if you try yourself, you can definitely understand, definitely know, definitely understand what's exactly going on with BLE. So to do that, you just start to explore. So the main problem with exploring BLE is we need real BLE device, right? So let's say you are going to learn about how BLE works. You need to connect with the BLE device. You need a real BLE hardware. To mitigate that also, we can find an alternative. Let's say you have iPhone, you have a MacBook, you can install a app called Light Blue. So you can, okay, I just type here the app called Light Blue, right? So you can install the application. I can show here. That's right. So this is the application, right? If you have Mac device, you can just install the app called Light Blue. In Light Blue, we can make your Mac device as a BLE device. Hope you understand, right? Let's say you have an iOS device or Android phone. So you need to experiment the BLE. So you can make your um, MacBook into a BLE device. Let's say this is a light blue. You can plus this plus button. You can create you can simulate any kind of light, like phone alert status, temperature service, heart rate, health thermometer, glucose measurement. There are different kind of blood pressure. There are different kind of virtual BLE device you can generate yourself with a light blue application. So to do that, you don't need a actual hardware to try yourself before buying a BLE device with money. You can just install this application and create your own BLE and just tick this mark. It will start advertising the heart rate value to other devices. So for example, yeah, so I can show. Give me a minute. Okay, let me share with my mobile phone. Okay, hope you can see my mobile phone. This is my mobile phone. You know, you can see the first loose MacBook Pro. Okay, this is my MacBook, but I made it as a BLE device. So, like here, you can see two services. You can also see two services. This is my mobile phone. I'm scanning from my mobile's BLE hardware. So when it go inside this, sorry, BLE. Give me a minute. Okay. I think there are some issue. Yeah, it's can. So you can see, this is my MacBook is my BLE device. My mobile is a peripheral. This mobile is a Flutter application. Yeah. I can just read the heart rate value from here to my uh, iPhone device. So, for example, okay, it's not working because I'm sharing screen, or it's kind of restriction the MacBook's giving. It's okay, hope you understand what's exactly BLE, right? So another thing is sometime we can't really use these packages to connect the BLE device. No, we can't really use these things because some BLE device come with encryption. Let's say the Apple smartwatch. We can't just read the uh, Apple smartwatch data from our Flutter application. It's restricted because it's highly encrypted between this iOS device and Apple Watch. Like that, there are several BLE devices which is restricted, so we can't just connect and scan and retrieve the data from that. So in that case, we must use their SDK. So they will the specific manufacturer will provide the SDKs, like native SDKs in Java or Kotlin or uh, Objective C, Swift, like that. They will give the native SDKs. In that case, we will need to do a method channel or event channel with the Flutter application to bridge between our Flutter and um, native level SDKs. In that case only we can really read that scan data from the BLE device. Then otherwise, it's highly encrypted, so the SDK must be used to do that. So in that case, we can't use these packages. Yeah. So hope you understand the BLE, the basic of BLE and how BLE is structured, what are the services, what are the characteristics, what are the available packages, and how to simulate a BLE device from your MacBook or iPhone. So I think you understand. So we can't actually jump into the coding, real coding, because you can't understand everything at once. So hope you enjoyed. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fazlur, for sharing your knowledge with us. And let me see if we have any questions. Okay, so I believe we don't have any. So I guess we can move on. So once again, Fazlur, thank you on behalf of GDG Sri Lanka and the Flutter Community Sri Lanka. And I guess we can move on to the next session. So I believe we still will have to wait for a few moments because the next speaker still hasn't joined. And until then, stay tuned. Hello and welcome back, everyone. And I know it has been a quite long break, but I assure you it'll be worth it. So, without further ado, let me welcome the third and the final speaker for the day, Mr. Ego El Sambo. So, hi, are you here?
Hi, hello,
Hello.
Akalan. How are you doing?
Hi. So, let me quickly introduce you. So, Mr. Ego is a software engineer, mobile software engineer at Affinity Health, South Africa, and he'll be speaking to us about how we can actually use alpha beta testing in our Flutter applications. So, over to you.
All right, thank you. So I'm coming from the southern part. I'm actually from Mozambique, Maputo. So I will be talking about a practical way to update Flutter application with remote config. But before starting with the topic, I would like to talk a bit about myself. My name is Igor El Samo, as Akalan already said. AKA is El Sambo02. You can find me on Twitter and also Medium, where I post my blog posts. I'm a mobile software engineer, and I consider myself a Flutter passionate because since I started learning in 2018, I'm being in this journey until now. So this is actually not the most important part that I would like to talk about myself. I'm a huge fan of Marvel, the MCU. So this way I will greet you guys. Feel greeted by me. So the topic is about A/B tests and remote config. So just to make sure that we're all in the same page, I would like to explain a bit what is really to be talking about A/B tests. When we talk about A/B test, or as it is known as split test, is when we have some hypothesis to test on our application. If we talk about in a web application, we can uh, split into groups and see which of the options is driving maybe more engagements, right? So basically, you can see here on the first image we have this list here. So the first group receives this variation of the application, and the other group receives this variation of the application. So after we have conducted our experiment, we can see maybe this group has driven more engagement in the, or maybe this group has low engagement over the other group. So basically, from the experiment that we run based on A/B test or the split test, we can know which of the hypotheses or which of the evaluation of our app or a specific point of our application is more able to drive users to use more this point on our application, right? So what happened is that in mobile application, to conduct these studies, we might have to make users download the new version every time we want to make sure that these variations are available to them. But what can happen in that instance is that when we are trying to make those experiments, some users might not be willing to just download the new version just because we want to test something. So they might eventually not use our application, but we want them to use the application. So that's when we use remote config. So remote config is a part of Firebase where we basically say that the configuration to that experiment or for that part of our application that we want to use, it's stored and configured on the server on the Firebase dashboard. So what happens is, let's say we want to test an hypothesis on A and B. So we put perhaps we want that data to make sure that the configuration are being configured on the web server. So uh, as you saw, I'm a mobile software engineer. So my goal is to make sure that my applications have both value to my company and also to the end user. So to make sure that that it's happening, I have to make sure that the decisions I make and the decisions are made by the team won't be affecting the users at the end goal, and obviously it won't affect how the company grows or the application or the users on the application will grow on time. So to make sure that we really understand this, I have prepared an example. So what I want here is to make sure that I have this application. I will call this my NFT application to make sure that minions are stored and trade on this application. So I have the application. I have my NFT minions on the application, right? So the application, let's say it's already on production and people are using the application. But to make sure that this application grows and people are using, and the company behind, I mean, me, I'm having like the driveness to I'm striving to make sure that the application grows and the business model grows. So I want people to make sure that they are adding more NFTs so they can trade more. So basically, the portfolio of the app grows, and eventually the application has some traction overall, right? But what I noticed is that people are not adding as much as I wanted some NFTs on this application. So they just enter on the application, they see the NFT that are already there. Some add their NFTs, but the majority of the users are not adding their NFTs. So I'm okay. Let's do two hypotheses. So the first one, maybe this button is not as big as it should be, or maybe this button is not in the right position. So maybe if we put here, people will see has the primary goal to the application and not just scroll around the NFT that are already present, right? So to do this, we're going to use remote config. So basically what we're going to do here is that we are going to add remote config to our project. So first of all, we're going to put remote config with this command. And after we run this command, we're going to see remote config here appearing. Obviously, the version might depend on the date that you are doing the experiment, and also to get, so to make sure that these dependencies are already running on your project. So after that, you have to make sure that your code is there. So the code to configure remote config, you will first of all, as any package, import the remote config that you already put on the pubspec.yaml. And also you're going to write this code here. This is a method to make sure that you are configuring the remote config, right? So basically you have here set config settings. So the first setting is fetch timeout. So fetch timeout is defining how long it will wait until the data that it's fetching from the Firebase takes to get on your application. So if the data is not on the application after that time, it has a timeout. So minimum fetch interval is it takes to the data that you put it or you changed the Firebase dashboard to reflect on your real application, on your application, I mean. So basically, if you change, for example, this to be a little bigger, it has to be changed according to this interval of time. And after that, you can define the defaults for the button. I mean, for the parameters that you want to make sure that you are controlling remotely from the server. So you have this action point controlled within the Firebase dashboard. So basically here, I said I want to make sure that I'm controlling two. The first I called button thickness, which is how big the button or how visible the button is to the user. And the last is the position of the button. So here, those parameters you can see from the brackets here, it's a map. So this is a string and this is the data. So we're going to see this in a bit more detail when we go and see how it works on the dashboard itself. So basically we have here this I defined has a variable instance in this. And then last but not least, we have to fetch and activate those data that are coming from our Firebase dashboard. And then you have, of course, to make sure that you run this code so that it has an effect on your application. So we have the code here. and we know what we want to test on our application. So if we know what we want to test and we also have the code, so we have to test this code, right? So to test this code, there are two things. First, we have to make sure that we configure the Firebase side, and also the variables that we want to control have to be dependent upon remote config. So first of all, we're going to jump onto the Firebase dashboard and see how we can play with the data there. So the first thing you are going to do is that you are going to Firebase dashboard, and you are going to enter on the A/B testing page, and you can see here we don't have any running experiments, and we can create a new one here. So when you create experiment here to A/B test, so we want to experiment on our versions or our hypothesis on how we can make sure that people are engaging more with the app. So here, so you can run A/B tests with remote config. You can also run with notifications app changing. So here I have you can see you can create remote experiment, and the experiment description. This is later. So my experiment here is experiment with add button thickness. I would probably add here and the position, but I didn't. So it's something we can make it better. So we click here next. We also have the targeting. So to which app we want to target with this experiment specifically. So you can target both your Android application and Android application. You can just click here and it show also the iOS, and also you can combine with some different options. So perhaps you have some profile, some specific profile that you want to target, and also the amount of people that you want to make sure that they get this experiment. So the recommended exposure that you have to have here is between 0 is not really a considerable number, right? So we can say from 5% to 10%, because you have to make sure that you have enough data that it's considerable to make sure that the data, the experiment is something that you can consider to a broad audience, but also you don't want to run the experiment in every user that you have on your application. So if something goes wrong, you are sure that you are not just say, hey, we don't want on your application to the user, to all the users. If something goes wrong on the experiment, at least you will maybe lose 5 to 2.5%, because it's a part of the experiment that will go wrong, not all the experiment, because you are testing different variations, right? So we have also the activation event here that I didn't use to this experiment. So basically here you're saying like, okay, I have this 10% of users that I want to experiment, but to make sure that they are getting in the experiment, they have to somehow have a toggle event, right? So they are considered in the experiment. So then we click on next, we set our goals. So we have to make sure that we are defining the goals to the experiment. Either is retention, either is we want to see how many users are crash free. We want to monitor purchases, right? So here I selected retention as my primary metric. So you can add as many metrics that you want, and you can start to see how it goes along the period of the experiment. So here we're going to add our variants. So we have actually not 2, but 3 variants. We have the first variant here. So it's the baseline. So we may not count as one, but I do. So this is actually how the application is right now. So the button thickness or the size of the button is the same. We have also the flattening position is false. We don't have any other parameter. So we have this variation. The first, we are going to change the size of the button, and we won't be playing with the floating position. But on the second variation, we are going to play with the position and the size will remain the same. So after we have input our data here, we can create our experiment and we have the draft created. So when you create the experiment, you're not saying the experiment is ready and it starts. The experiment is ready, but you can review the experiment and you can test on your devices, on your emulators or simulators. So here we have the page that shows the experiment. We have 3 variants. We have 10%. The main criteria is retention, or the main goal, how long it has been created, how many users. So spoiler alert, this is not a real application. So it has stack. So it, uh, we can device we before the that we are seeing uh, so that we here at this device. After when we the Firebase, so this we using Firebase app installation, print the and copy to and print config to be flagging groups. So I let me something we can do so that is so becomes big but it will be reflecting. So is that when you are config you are using to from or remote control, so data is set to this value is you inputting the base user gets which dimension, so this is going to be input. So we can jump so to the second use case. This also change here. Basically, saying it's a that it is a floating dot. So in remote configuration, so it's not create size box. So we get this flat action button, and the size here also is controlled by the remote config. So basically, this is how we make sure that we have the remote configured to our application, no pun intended. And we can also see how the remote config data is being used. So this page is not actually the A/B testing, it's the remote config. So the the remote config is not really about the test, it's about the data that we are using to control the application. So here we can see we have 5 total fetches. So it's how many times your device have been fetching for the data and how many devices specifically have been fetching. So in this case, it's only me, it's one device. So we have here, and we have also which data or experiments we have on the A/B testing. So we have here 2 drafts and 1 completed. So we can see here. And also here we can see some of parameters that we have. So here we have only 2. We have the add button thickness. We have the float position. So having here, we can see that it's attached to this experiment, both at the same attached to the same experiment. The first one is we can see some of the values. So the baseline, the variant A, the variant B. As we can see for this parameter, the default value is 20. We saw there that it was smaller. On the first variant, we have a little bigger. And here for the baseline and the first variation are false. So the position is not floating, but on the last is floating. So here I'm saying, okay, the default value depends upon the application. So you have the option to make sure that remote config has the default value or the application. But as you saw before, this value is also defined on the application. So if eventually something goes wrong, I have the value on the application offline. So after we have checked the experiment and we are sure that this can be started and shipped to real devices, we can just click on Start Experiment upon after clicking on the experiment here. So you can click here, and then it takes to this page. After clicking on Start Experiment, it will show this dialog table here. So once you start the experiment, parameters are immediately available to your apps and users. So basically, once this experiment starts, it will be reflecting. The default time to reflect is actually 12 hours upon you starting the experiment. So you start, and the information here change is no longer a draft, is waiting for experiment data to arrive. So since this is not a real project, is not in production, has no real users, we won't never receive the information that we need to actually make a decision, either the users will be interacting more with that button or not. So I will explain how we can interpret the results here on this page. So scroll a bit more, we can see, first of all, we can see here we have retention 2 to 3 days, 4 to 7 days, and crash. Remember we added those goals before, so we have to add another goals as we define the experiment. So here we can see what are the results to this date. So here we will see change users between 2 to 3 days time span to first variant, second, and the last one. The return rate, a bit of a line. So here you have some information like if we have, let's say, 50 users affected by the baseline here, and they are clicking on done, they have retention of 50 users, right? So here we have 75. So this means the percentage will be 50% higher than the baseline. And here, let's say 25. So basically, it will be 50% lower than the baseline. So basically, here is the actual data. It's being delivered from the users, from the experiment. So here, the modeled data is actually a probability of how the experiment will end. So basically, here on the observed data is what is real, and here is how actually we can use the data. So because this is probabilities, we have to make sure that we wait a bit of on that 90 days, we don't take any decision based on this data or even the observed data, of course, because the experiment has to be on a large time span. So basically, we have to make sure that this we take a bit of caution, because any decision that we make before the experiment ends, it's not really concise at that point. So basically, we will have some of the data, the probability to beat baseline. So as I was explaining here, the model data can have some of the this information, and also the difference between the baseline and the retention rate. So after the 90 days, we can see this information, study the information, see which variation has a better retention rate, which variation higher different line, if the baseline is performing better than the two variation that we had. So from that point on, we can simply say, okay, roll out this experiment to all users using the variation that we want. So basically, this is what I had for today. Thank you for being with me. If you have any question, now is the time. You can also be connected to me on LinkedIn. Just find my name. It's Igor Leolindo Sambo, or on Twitter, Sambo 02. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Igo, for filling us in all of that, and sorry for the slight delay. So I believe we are into the Q&A session. So do we have any questions? Let's see. Okay, so I believe we don't have any. So I guess with that, we can wrap up the session for today. We have reached the end of the agenda. And once again, thank you for joining with us. And I believe that this will be the very first step into rekindling a new future for all of those soon-to-be Flutter developers out there. So with that, I guess we can wrap up the track. Thank you.